Hi, and welcome to the I Teed Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 54. What can police and drag teach us about honeypots? So, police and drag. It's a tale as old as time. I'm going to hit that note quite often. Anyway, police and drag. Back in the 60s, there was an operation in LA. There was a string of purse snatchers, purse thieves, going after women specifically, and specifically women alone by themselves in LA. And it was such a common event that police were trying to figure out a way to stop it and to catch the thieves. And so what they did is they actually made an entire division of police whose job it was to dress as women, dress and drag. And so what they would do is they'd have these women basically, or these dudes dress up in headscarves and long jackets and kind of hunch themselves over so they look like older ladies. And they of course chose all of the slightest of the police officers and threw them into these outfits. There's actually a picture. I'll post a link to it in the show notes. But they all look quite ridiculous. I mean, if you saw them face on, you'd pretty much like, that is one ugly woman. Not to say that all people who participate in drag are, but these cops definitely did not put any effort into it. So when they did this, their intent was to try to catch a thief. Try to catch a purse snatcher, and I don't actually have any indication in any of the stuff I've been able to look up if this was actually successful or not. It could be, you put enough police and drag out there. I'm sure one of them will be a good enough actor to catch the purse snatcher. But honestly, most of them probably aren't good enough actors to look like an older lady, to look the part. But this type of scenario has actually occurred quite often before. In fact, one of the most famous cases where police dressed up as women was in London in the 1800s to try to catch the serial killer Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper, if you didn't know, was a serial killer in London who specifically targeted women, and the assumption is that he targeted prostitutes in London, and the police basically never found him. And supposedly there were letters written by him taunting the police, basically trying to get them to find him. I don't remember if that was debunked, but I think it was that he taunted the police. At any rate, the police in this instance also tried to dress up in drag to catch him. But the part of the problem with the 1800s cops in London is that they were all ex-military, and ex-military officers, I believe, which, if you know anything about the British, they are some of the most uptight, or at least in the 1800s, some of the most uptight folk around. And proper English gentlemen don't walk with their back straight and their arms out. And it's this, they basically, their gait gave them away. There's no fucking way you'd believe that a woman walking around 6'2", with her shoulders squared in the 1800s London. Now they can do whatever they want. I don't care. But yeah, in the 1800s, it was pretty fucking easy to tell that, yeah, this is a dude. This is a military dude dressed up as a woman. At any rate, these instances were where police dressed in drag were there to catch the criminal. They were there to entice the criminal to commit a crime where they were already going to commit it. And what we see when we deploy a honeypot, what we do when we deploy a honeypot is we basically do the same thing. We deploy a target for an attacker to get at. And then we use that honeypot to identify what they are doing, to attempt to see how they interact with the honeypot, so that we can potentially tell or spot anything new that they might be doing. There's actually several different kinds of honeypots. That's just one of them, where an attacker gains access, and we as security individuals, as security researchers, attempt to identify what they're doing. Another type of honeypot is called a canary, and this is a play off the word or the term canary in the coal mine. Basically, what a canary in the coal mine is, back in the days before modern gas sensors and proper safety controls, one of the ways that miners, specifically coal miners, knew that an area was safe is they would take a canary bird down with them. And as the bird was in the cage, it would sing and tweet and, make noise. And as soon as the bird stopped saying anything or died, they knew they had hit a gas. They knew they had hit gas, and they had to get out before they all died. And so they would use the canary to basically indicate whether or not they were safe. And that is another way that honeypots can be used. You can use them to identify when an attacker has gotten into your network. And the way you do this is you set up the honeypot in your network on the same layer as everything else. And when that starts going off, when you see it reporting that it's being touched, you know immediately that somebody else is in your network, because for the most part, nobody who knows anything about your own network should be touching a canary. Now, there are several open source projects out there. There's actually a very good open source canary project that I'll link in the show notes. But canaries can be very useful in a lot of ways, and we can do canaries through a lot of different means. It doesn't necessarily just have to be a server on a network. There's also something called canary credentials. So you stuff these into your email or other places where an attacker may gain access. And when they attempt to use these credentials, you can spot where they attempt to get in. You can also do honeypot credentials as well that allow them to get access into a tenant, and so that you can see what they do and how they act. And ultimately, what this is attempting to do, what honeypots are attempting to do, is really they are attempting to secure your environment by providing a distraction for an attacker. If you have a proper honeypot, it's basically isolated away from the rest of your network. It's a bastion of isolation where an attacker is basically simulating an attack against the rest of your network. You create a honeypot as a very juicy target. You when you're deploying a honeypot, you make sure that it looks like an older operating system. Maybe it's an older system that hasn't quite been patched yet, that you're having to keep on for legacy purposes, and that's the type of device that you want to create. Because if you create, but you want to make sure that you're not creating it so obvious that it's a honeypot. Naming it legacy server might give it away, because legacy, nobody would call their server legacy. And in fact, no IT person that I know of would take the time to rename a server that they're never going to touch as legacy. What they'll probably do is you name it as something strange, basically to indicate that, hey, this was before the time of standardization in this company, and that's why the server hasn't been updated. And so this is where you would use your creativity in naming it like a superhero name or something off. This is where you probably use Chubby Hugs as a name for a server. So that way the attacker sees it and can't really tell what the hell it is. But they see that it's got it's a juicy target because it's got like SMPV1 open on it. It has a SQL server that is actively responding. It responds to ping. this also hasn't been patched since 2012, so it's blue keep vulnerable, and so an attacker gets into it and looks at it. But if you make it too obvious, that will cause an attacker to not avoid it. It'll cause them to avoid it entirely. Which is why, including canary protocols on a honeypot is important, because even if an attacker were to go in and see all that information, they're at least creating activity against the honeypot, which then, if you have canary protocols on it, it will alert you that it's being hit and at least tell you that somebody is doing something that they shouldn't be on your network. Now, all that being said, some of the other aspects of a honeypot that you want to make sure you have are things like session recording. You want to be able to see what they were doing, what they've done, what they were trying to do. And you also want to have as much logging on that bad boy as you possibly can, because you want to see what they were connecting to, what they were attempting to load, where they went, how they attempted to gain access to other aspects of the network, how they attempted to move laterally across the network. And you want to track all of these things to try to identify exactly who and what they might have been doing, and so that you can report it out. So that's the other aspect of using honeypots, is you want to use this data to report out. You want to try to report, hey, this is what we found on our honeypot. And this is actually something that a lot of security organizations and organizations with security apparatus do. They do this very well, is they share this information out. There are a lot of threat exchanges. One of the ones that's really big is the Alien Vault Open Threat Exchange. But these threat exchanges provide this data from honeypots or active attacks that have been responded to, investigated, and remediated. And these attacks and this data can help the rest of us protect against these specific attacks. They can help us track them specifically and identify them directly. Using other threat feed information, you can also provide additional support and protection for an organization beyond just normal, hey, I'm tracking what we're doing, I'm seeing everything that we're connecting to. And now, with this data, I am able to actively identify potentially malicious activity. And so that's what you want to do with all of this information. And that's why this is why honeypots are important. Again, it's not necessarily just an aspect of prevention with an attacker. It's also provide them a distraction for them to get caught in your network and basically allow you the ability to respond appropriately. So what does that? So what should your actions be after an attacker gains access to your honeypot? Well, the response, is going to be pretty. It's going to depend on what your policies and procedures are within your own organization. It really depends on what your goal is and whatnot. Because with police, it was pretty easy for those guys to act on their mission by arresting whoever approached them or catching the bad guy as they attempt to snatch a purse. That was kind of easy for them to do. But you don't want to necessarily arrest the guy who's like, "Let me help you across the street, ma'am," because that's that's kind of a shitty thing to do. Though I don't know, cops today might do that. Anyway, so what you want to do with your own honeypot when an attacker gets access into it, you want to make sure that you have all this data. Since you've recorded it, you want to make sure you have the data to follow up. But what you want to do is you want to create an incident. And when you are crafting your own internal policies and procedures, what you want to do is you want to create a policy that states when an attacker gets into your organization and attacks the honeypot, you create an incident. And what we mean when we say create an incident in this circumstance is you are actually going through the full investigation, discovery, investigation, and reporting aspect of an incident response. You are you're basically acting like they got the keys to the castle, and you're reporting all of the information that they have. And the reason why you do this is so that way you have an official crafted document that says this is what we saw, this is what they did, and this is what we're going to do to stop this activity in the future. And you need to do this. This is not something that you can avoid doing, because if you don't do this, you can actually put yourself in a circumstance where you're not able to tell what an attacker has done. You're not able to do anything about the breach in your network, because you ultimately want to identify how this attacker got in, how they were able to move laterally across your network to even hit your honeypot, because you're not going to expose your honeypot, your canary server, whatever, to the internet. You're not just going to have it out there for them to attack, though you can if you really want to, but you're going to get a lot of noise. If you have it within your own network and they get into it, then it becomes something of a target for you to identify all that information. So then what are you going to do with all this information now that you've gathered it? You're going to report it out to whatever threat exchanges you have. You may, if necessary, report it out to the FBI or certain regulatory personnel. And in the case of organizations within specific compliance frameworks, you may be required to report it to that compliance oversight organization. So like if you're a publicly traded company, you would want to disclose this to the SEC and probably disclose this to your shareholders as well. Hey, we were attacked, we were able to defend it off, and this is what we saw. And you have a chance when you do this reporting to actually shine a little bit. Be like, hey, we were attacked, we were able to defend it off, and these are the reasons why. And this is how we were able to detect that attack. And it makes you look better as an organization to be able to report this. And so not only that, but also reporting it to the threat exchange allows everybody else a chance to defend themselves against the same attack, and can prevent future attacks as we all work together. So beyond that, what you want to do with your honeypot in your organization is, after an attack, you probably want to wipe it. You'll probably want to clear it out and create a new honeypot with an entirely new name, and probably change its footprint. So that way, the attacker won't be able to share that information out. It'll become useless to anybody else. Because another thing that attackers will do when they get into networks is they will provide reconnaissance reports and dossiers and share them across the various hacker forums and across other organizations. Because believe me, they are hackers will work together as much or more than we will, than security professionals will. And so they will provide this data out. Hey, I got into this organization. This is the data that I saw. These are the things that I know of based on the information that I had. And basically providing an attacker inside information so that they can perform better, deeper, more informed attacks on your network. And so changing your honeypot, making it more dynamic, makes some of that information kind of useless. Now, that being said, there are probably a lot of other things and ways to use honeypots that I'm missing here, but this overall is kind of how you use and what a honeypot is intended for. And that this is different than like a Bastion network or a DMZ or other protected or isolated network away from your production environment. But all of these things kind of tie in together, or can be related together in other ways. And we'll cover some of these in other episodes as we move on. But if you are a security professional or looking to get into security, this is one of those topics that can be confusing, because honeypots do have some relation to other aspects of security, and can be the questions that some of these certification tests ask about honeypots can be worded poorly. And so knowing exactly what a honeypot is, knowing how it's used and how it's performed, can help you pass a certification test and allow you to utilize your own honeypot in an environment, as well as feeding the Pooh Bear all of the honey. Anyways, guys, that's all I have time for today, and I hope you have a great day.